This won't happen again for almost 20 years. Today, August 18th, is the day it resets. I want to explain exactly what it is, because I think this is one of those astrology topics that gets mentioned a lot but rarely actually explained. And once you understand what's happening, today stops feeling like a random Tuesday and starts making a lot more sense. Today, the North Node moves into Aquarius. And I know that sentence means nothing on its own if you don't already follow this stuff closely. So let me back up and actually walk through it properly. The lunar nodes, the North Node and South Node, aren't planets. They're not physical objects at all. They're mathematical points, the two spots where the moon's orbit crosses the sun's apparent path around the Earth. Every eclipse happens near one of these 2 points, which is actually the whole reason astrologers pay attention to them in the first place. They mark where the sun, moon, and Earth are capable of lining up. The North Node and South Node sit exactly opposite each other, always in opposite signs, and they slowly move backward through the zodiac over time, a process called nodal precession. A full loop through all 12 signs takes about 18.5 years, which means the nodes spend somewhere around 18 months in each sign before moving to the next one. So when people talk about the nodes changing signs, this is what they mean. Roughly every year and a half, the North Node finishes its stretch through one sign and moves into the previous one, since it travels backward rather than forward the way most planets do. And today, August 18th, that shift lands in Aquarius, with the South Node moving into the opposite sign, Leo. Now, here's a detail that actually matters if you want to understand why some sources already said this happened back in late July, and why I'm telling you it's happening today. There are 2 ways astrologers calculate the nodes: the true node and the mean node. The true node tracks the moon's actual, real-time orbital path, which wobbles a little and occasionally even appears to pause or briefly reverse direction because the moon's orbit itself isn't perfectly smooth. The mean node, on the other hand, is a simplified, averaged-out version of the same calculation, moving at a constant, steady rate with no wobble. Most of the time, the two are only a degree or so apart, and it barely matters which one you use. But right around a sign change, that small gap can be enough to put the true node into a new sign several weeks before the mean node catches up. That's exactly what happened here. The true node crossed into Aquarius back on July 26th. The mean node, moving at its steady, average pace, crosses the same line today, August 18th. Neither calculation is wrong. They're just 2 different ways of measuring the same slow, backward drift, and today is when the more traditional, more commonly used version, the mean node, officially makes the shift. I think that's worth explaining clearly instead of glossing over, because a lot of astrology content either ignores this distinction entirely or treats it like a minor technicality. It's not really a technicality. If you've been reading that the nodes already changed in July, and you're now seeing content saying it's happening today, this is why, and both are technically correct depending on which system the source is using. For what it's worth, this isn't really a debate with a clear winner, it's more a difference in tradition. A lot of modern Western astrology software defaults to the true node these days, since it reflects the moon's actual position more precisely. But a huge amount of the historical astrological literature, going back generations, and a lot of Vedic and traditional astrology specifically, was built around the mean node, because it's simpler to calculate by hand and was the standard long before software existed to track the true node's wobble in real time. Some astrologers will tell you true node is more accurate. Others will tell you mean node is more traditionally correct, and that the wobble is basically noise that doesn't matter for interpretation. I'm not going to pretend there's a settled answer. Both camps have decent arguments, and honestly, a lot of practicing astrologers just pick one and stay consistent rather than agonizing over it every time. I'm using the mean node date for today's video mostly because it's still the more widely referenced default across mainstream astrology content and software, not because I think it's definitively the right one. Okay, so with the mechanics out of the way, let's get into why this particular shift is actually a bigger deal than a typical nodal sign change, and why I'm using that almost 20 years framing instead of just saying the nodes moved. The North Node hasn't been in Aquarius since December 2007 through August 2009. Before that, it was there from May 1989 to November 1990. Before that, November 1970 to April 1972. You can see the pattern. This comes back around roughly every 18 to 19 years, and each time it does, it's specifically the Aquarius-Leo axis, not some other pair of signs. So today isn't just the nodes moved into a new sign, which happens every year and a half regardless. Today is specifically the moment we return to this particular axis, the Aquarius-Leo axis, for the first time in almost 2 decades. I want to be careful here, because I think this is exactly the kind of detail that gets oversold in this space. I'm not going to tell you that 2008 is repeating, or that whatever happened in your life back then is about to happen again in some literal sense. What I will say is that astrologers who track these cycles do look back at the previous Aquarius-Leo period for context, not as prediction, but as a rough thematic echo. The late 2000s window overlapped with a global financial crisis, a massive shift in how people organized and mobilized through emerging social platforms, and a lot of public conversation about systems that had quietly stopped working the way people assumed they did. Whether or not you think the nodes had anything to do with that is genuinely up to you. Correlation over a handful of cycles isn't the same as proof of causation, and I'd rather say that plainly than pretend this is settled science. But the thematic through line, structures breaking down, and people organizing differently in response lines up closely enough with what Aquarius and Leo represent that it's worth knowing about, even if you take it as a loose pattern rather than a hard rule. Let me actually walk through those 3 previous cycles a little more, because I think the specifics make this land better than just saying it's an 18-year pattern and moving on. The 1970 to 1972 window overlaps with a period of major social reorganization, a lot of grassroots, community-oriented movements gaining real traction, environmental awareness becoming a mainstream political issue for really the first time, and a broader cultural shift away from rigid, individual authority structures toward more collective, group-based organizing. Again, I'm not claiming the nodes caused any of that. I'm saying the astrologers who track these cycles point to that period as an earlier example of the same Aquarius-Leo theme, ego and authority giving ground to collective and community. The 1989 to 1990 window is a genuinely striking one to look at, because it overlaps almost exactly with the fall of the Berlin Wall and the broader collapse of a lot of centralized, individually controlled political systems across Eastern Europe, alongside a wave of new, more decentralized structures trying to take their place. Again, correlation, not proof, but it's the kind of overlap that keeps this cycle on astrologers' radar. And the 2007 to 2009 window, the most recent one, overlapped with the global financial crisis, a systemic failure that exposed how fragile a lot of individually incentivized financial structures actually were, alongside the early rise of social media platforms that fundamentally changed how people organized, communicated, and mobilized collectively. Facebook opened to the general public in 2006, right before this node cycle began, and by the end of it, in 2009, it had become a genuinely global phenomenon reshaping collective behavior at a scale nothing had before. I lay all of this out not to convince you the nodes are some kind of deterministic force, but because I think it's a more honest way to engage with this material than either dismissing it outright or overselling it as guaranteed prophecy. The pattern is there if you're inclined to look for it. What you do with that pattern is genuinely up to you. So what do these 2 signs actually represent, in plain terms, without the mystical language? Leo, where the South Node is heading, is about individual identity, personal recognition, being seen and celebrated as yourself, specifically. It's warm, expressive, and confident, but its shadow side is a kind of self-centeredness, needing to be the main character, needing external validation to feel like you matter. The South Node represents what's familiar, what you already know how to do, sometimes almost too well, to the point that it stops serving you. Aquarius, where the North Node is heading, is about the collective, the group, the bigger system you're part of rather than just your individual place in it. It's associated with innovation, with stepping back from personal ego to ask what actually serves the community or the world, with detachment in the healthy sense, being able to see a bigger picture instead of just your own immediate feelings. The North Node represents growth, the direction that feels less natural and more effortful, precisely because it's less familiar. Put together, this North Node in Aquarius, South Node in Leo cycle is generally read as a pull away from look at me and toward how do I actually contribute to something bigger than myself. not in a way that erases individuality. That's not really what Aquarius is about either. It's actually one of the more individualistic signs in its own way, just less focused on being personally celebrated for it. It's more a shift in where you're getting your sense of worth from. Less from being singled out and admired, more from being useful, being part of something, building or fixing something that outlasts you. If you want a very simple way to hold this, Leo asks, how do I express who I am? Aquarius asks, what am I actually here to build alongside other people? Neither question is better than the other, and honestly, most people need both at different points in their life. But collectively, for the next roughly year and a half, the emphasis is shifting toward the second question. Let me also address something a lot of people ask when this topic comes up, which is basically, okay, but what does the North Node even mean? Why does it represent growth instead of just being a random axis? This one's worth actually explaining rather than just asserting. The idea comes from the fact that eclipses cluster around the nodes, and eclipses have historically been read as points of significant, often uncomfortable change, moments where something gets revealed or forced into motion faster than it would under ordinary circumstances. Because the South Node sits on the axis representing what's familiar and already developed, and the North Node sits on the opposite axis representing what's underdeveloped and unfamiliar. The framework treats moving toward the North Node sign as the growth-oriented direction, leaning into the less comfortable, less automatic way of operating, because that's where the actual development happens. It's not that Leo or your South Node sign is bad, it's more that it's already familiar territory, so there's less to be gained by staying there exclusively. This is an interpretive framework built up over a long tradition of astrological practice, not an empirical claim, and I think it's fair to hold it that way. Useful lens, not proven mechanism. It's also worth mentioning briefly what this means if you know your own natal chart's node placement, since the collective theme and your personal theme aren't always the same thing. Your personal North Node sign was set by your exact birth date, and it stays fixed for your entire life. It's not something that changes as you age. This collective transit, the North Node moving through the sky into Aquarius, is a completely different thing. It's about where the nodes currently sit for everyone, right now, regardless of when you were born. Both matter, but they answer different questions. Your natal node tells you your own personal growth edge. This current transit tells you what theme the wider collective is being nudged toward. And if your placements happen to line up, if your own natal North Node is in Aquarius, this particular stretch is going to feel especially relevant and active for you specifically, more than it will for someone whose natal nodes sit elsewhere. Now, why does today specifically matter versus just reading about this cycle in general? I think there's a real difference between understanding a theme intellectually and actually marking the moment it starts. A lot of people will read articles about North Node in Aquarius 2026 inches without ever registering the actual date it began, and honestly, for the true node, that already happened weeks ago without much fanfare. But today, for anyone using the mean node calculation, which is still the standard in a lot of traditional and Western astrology software and reference material, this is the actual pivot point. If you've felt a certain restlessness lately, a sense that something familiar isn't quite fitting the way it used to, today's a reasonable day to actually name that instead of letting it stay vague. I'll be honest about what this doesn't mean, too. It doesn't mean you'll wake up tomorrow with a completely different personality, or that some external force is about to hand you a revelation. Nodal shifts are slow, structural background themes, closer to a shift in prevailing wind direction than a single dramatic event. The next 18 months are going to keep unfolding this theme gradually, not all at once today. What today actually offers is a marker, a specific point you can look back to later and say, that's roughly when this direction started making itself known. So here's what I'd actually suggest doing with this information, and I'll keep it simple because I don't think a nodal shift calls for anything dramatic. First, if you already know your natal North Node and South Node placement, this transit interacts with your own chart specifically, not just the collective theme. If your personal North Node is in Aquarius, this year and a half is an especially relevant stretch for you individually, worth paying closer attention to. If you don't know your placement, it takes about 30 seconds to look up with your birth date, time, and location, and it's genuinely useful context if you want to go deeper than the general collective theme I've been describing. A quick note on how to actually find it, since I know some of you will want to check right after watching this. Any free birth chart calculator will show it. You'll usually see it labeled as North Node, or sometimes with the astrological glyph that looks like a horseshoe or headphone symbol. You'll need your birth date, and ideally your birth time and location for accuracy, since the nodes do shift signs mid-month sometimes, similar to what's happening today. If you don't have your exact birth time, you can still get a reasonably reliable sign placement most of the time, since the node moves slowly enough that it usually doesn't flip signs within a single day, though it's worth double-checking if your birthday happens to fall close to a known ingress date. It's also worth remembering that your south node sign is automatically the opposite of your north node sign, so once you know one, you know both. If your north node is in Aquarius, for instance, your south node is in Leo, meaning you'd have been born with this exact axis already wired into your own personal chart, which tends to make this current collective transit land especially strongly for you, since it echoes your own individual growth story rather than just a generic collective backdrop. Second, regardless of your personal chart, it's worth asking yourself a fairly direct question today. Where in your life have you been operating from a look-at-me place, needing to be seen, needing credit, needing to be the center of something, and where might that actually be costing you rather than serving you? This isn't a judgment. Everyone needs that Leo energy sometimes. It's healthy to want to be seen. It's just worth noticing where it's become the default instead of a choice. Third, ask the inverse question. Where have you been holding back from contributing to something bigger than yourself because it didn't come with enough individual recognition attached? A project where you'd rather not participate unless you get full credit. A community or group effort you've quietly avoided because it wouldn't be about you specifically. That's usually the more uncomfortable question, and it's usually the more useful one. And fourth, if you want something concrete rather than just reflective, this is a decent stretch to actually join something. A group, a collaborative project, a cause, a community, something structured around a shared goal rather than individual achievement. You don't have to do this today specifically. The theme runs through early 2028, but today's as good a starting point as any if something's already been on your mind. Since a lot of you will want to know how this actually lands for your specific sign, I'll go through it briefly, sun sign by sun sign. Keep in mind, this is a broad strokes read. Your rising sign and your natal node placement shape the specifics more precisely, but this should give you a general sense of where this theme is likely to show up. Aries, this transit tends to land in your house of community and future goals, so expect a pull toward group projects, causes, or long-term visions rather than solo pursuits. You might find yourself less interested in winning something outright and more interested in building something with other people. Taurus, this often lands in your career and public reputation zone, so there could be a shift toward wanting your work to serve something bigger than personal advancement, less about climbing for its own sake, more about what you're actually contributing to. Gemini, this tends to activate themes around belief systems, travel, and bigger picture thinking, a pull toward connecting with wider communities or ideas outside your usual circle, rather than staying inside familiar, comfortable conversations. Cancer, this often shows up around shared resources, intimacy, and letting go of control in partnerships, less about protecting your own emotional territory, more about genuinely merging with someone or something outside yourself. Leo, this is the sign your south node is leaving, so you'll likely feel this one directly, a pull away from needing to be the center of attention and toward finding meaning in collaboration instead. It can feel like a quiet identity recalibration over the next year and a half. Virgo, this tends to land in the partnership zone, an emphasis on showing up for relationships as an equal collaborator rather than the one who handles everything alone, more sharing of responsibility than usual. Libra, this often activates daily routines, health, and service, a pull toward organizing your day-to-day life around contribution and community involvement rather than just personal preference and comfort. Scorpio, this tends to land in creativity, romance, and self-expression, an invitation to create or express yourself in ways that connect with or serve other people, rather than purely as private, personal outlets. Sagittarius, this often shows up around home, family, and your sense of emotional foundation, a pull toward building community closer to home or redefining what family means to include people outside blood relations. Capricorn, this tends to activate communication and local community, an emphasis on how you talk to and connect with the people immediately around you, less top-down authority, more genuine, peer-level exchange. Aquarius, this is the sign your North Node is entering. So like Leo, you're likely to feel this one directly, a pull towards stepping into more collective, community-oriented roles, and an invitation to loosen your grip on needing full independence or control over outcomes. Pisces, this often lands in resources, income, and personal values, a pull toward reconsidering what you actually value and how your resources might serve something collective, rather than being purely about individual security. I'll be upfront that these 12-sign rundowns are always a simplification. Real chart work involves your exact birth chart, not just your sun sign, but if any of these resonated more than the others, that's usually a decent sign it's worth looking into your actual chart placement further. A reasonable question at this point is whether any of this is falsifiable, whether there's a way to actually test it rather than just noticing patterns after the fact. Honestly, no, not in a rigorous scientific sense, and I think it's more useful to be upfront about that than to dress it up as something it isn't. What I'd say in its defense is that using a recurring astronomical cycle as a prompt for reflection isn't the same claim as saying the cycle directly causes events. You can find the framework useful as a lens for noticing your own patterns and timing your own reflection without needing to believe the sky is mechanically steering outcomes. That's roughly how I'd suggest holding all of this. Useful scaffolding for self-reflection, not a mechanism you need to defend to a skeptic. I want to close with the honest version of all this, not the dramatic version. The North Node moving into Aquarius today isn't going to change your life by itself. Nothing about a mathematical point in the sky obligates anything to happen to you. What it offers, if you find this kind of framework useful, is a specific, datable marker for a theme that was probably already stirring under the surface. Individual recognition slowly giving way to collective contribution, both in the culture at large and potentially in your own life, if you're paying attention to where that shows up for you. If you felt something shifting in how you want to spend your time or energy lately, less interested in being seen, more interested in being useful, that's a pretty on-the-nose signature of exactly this transit, and it's a reasonable thing to trust rather than dismiss as random. I also want to tie this back to everything else that's been going on this month, since none of this is happening in isolation. There was a total solar eclipse in Leo on August 12th, sitting right on this exact same axis the nodes are now settling into. That's not a coincidence. Eclipses only happen near the nodes in the first place, so an eclipse landing in Leo right before the nodes officially shift into the Leo-Aquarius axis is about as directly connected as two astrological events can be. If that eclipse stirred up anything for you around identity, recognition, or wanting to be seen differently, today's node shift is essentially the slower, longer-term version of the same conversation. The eclipse was the spark. This node shift is the multi-year context that spark is landing inside of. That's the actual explanation behind today's date. Not a warning, not a countdown, just an accurate account of something that genuinely doesn't happen very often, and what it tends to be associated with when it does. One last thing I want to say, because I think it's easy to walk away from a video like this feeling like you need to do something big today to honor the shift. You don't. This is an 18-month theme, not a 24-hour deadline. If today passes and you don't reflect on any of this until next week or next month, you haven't missed anything. The node isn't going back into Leo tomorrow. What's actually useful here is just having the information sit somewhere in the back of your mind so that when you notice yourself pulling toward more collaborative, community-minded choices over the coming months, you have some context for why, instead of it feeling random or unexplained. If you want to go deeper, drop your North Node sign in the comments if you know it. I'll try to speak to specific placements in a follow-up. And if breakdowns like this, the actual mechanics behind the astrology instead of just the hype, are useful to you, subscribing helps me keep making them.